The history of African American women's suffrage movement. The African American women's suffrage movement was a part of the larger suffrage movement in the United States that fought for women's right to vote. However, African American women faced unique challenges and discrimination within the suffrage movement due to their race and gender. African American women were often excluded from suffrage organizations and events due to racism and discrimination, and they had to form their own organizations to fight for their rights. One of the most notable organizations was the National Association of Colored Women, NACW, founded in 1896, which focused on issues such as suffrage, education, and the abolition of lynching. African American suffragists also faced opposition from white suffragists who believed that gaining the right to vote for white women was more important than fighting for the rights of African American women. Despite these challenges, African American women played a vital role in the suffrage movement and were involved in organizing marches, protests, and other events. It wasn't until the passage of the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution in 1920 that women in the United States were granted the right to vote. However, even after the passage of the amendment, African American women faced continued discrimination and barriers to voting, including literacy tests, poll taxes, and other discriminatory practices. It wasn't until the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which prohibited discriminatory voting practices, that African American women and men were able to fully exercise their right to vote. The story of Harriet Forten. Harriet Forten Purvis, 1810 to 1875, was an African American abolitionist, suffragist, and women's rights activist. She was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to a prominent African American family, and grew up in a household that was committed to the abolitionist movement and the fight for women's rights. Harriet Forten Purvis was educated at a Quaker school in New York, where she developed her interest in social justice and women's rights. She later became involved in the abolitionist movement and worked closely with other notable abolitionists such as Frederick Douglass, William Lloyd Garrison, and Susan B. Anthony. In 1833, Harriet Forten Purvis helped to found the Philadelphia Female Anti-Slavery Society, which was one of the first organizations in the United States to be run by and for women. She served as the society's treasurer and was a key figure in organizing anti-slavery lectures, fundraising events, and other activities. In addition to her work as an abolitionist, Harriet Forten Purvis was also a strong advocate for women's rights. She believed that women should have the same rights and opportunities as men, including the right to vote. She worked closely with Susan B. Anthony and other suffragists to advance the cause of women's suffrage. Harriet Forten Purvis died in 1875, but her legacy as an abolitionist, suffragist, and advocate for women's rights continues to inspire people to this day. She was a trailblazer for women of color and helped pave the way for future generations of women to fight for their rights and achieve greater equality.